TOA community, welcome back to the channel, everybody. Robert Linkul, trainingtheolderadult.com, and welcome to Wednesdays with Robert, episode number 12. We are ready and happy to have you all here. Talk about something. Number one, we're going to talk about lower back injuries, exposure, different positions and exercises you can do. I'm going to do a couple demos, a few things that I really think could be beneficial for you, your clients, etc. But we do have to start off with some really sad news. A friend of ours, colleague of ours, Mr. Vince Minnie, passed away yesterday. We don't know any of the details as to what happened. We just know that yesterday morning, September 5th, we got word that Vince was no longer with us. Vince is a great man. He was a warden at the prison for 20-something years, maybe longer. Got into fitness, opened a gym called Vince Minnie's House of Pain. And it was literally in the basement of his house. He had he played for the Philadelphia Eagles a couple of seasons, and then he got into bodybuilding, competed in some bodybuilding shows, and created this awesome home gym and just kept adding and adding and adding. It was like a 2,000 square foot basement. I mean, it was big. And he turned it into a fully functional gym, and he lived right down the street from Oak Ridge, or one of the high schools around here. And he became their strength coach, and a bunch of the kids came, and as he progressed and he was training a whole bunch of the players, businesses kind of took off. He eventually opened his own location in El Dorado Hills. A bunch of our former employees and TOA colleagues and such worked there for him. A fantastic guy. His business partner, Gabriel Jackson, Tony Mikla, the PT that they work with there, all great guys. It's an awesome team of people. And it's just really sad and devastating news to see that Vince is no longer here. My personal interactions and connections with Vince, we had about a 10-year run. I think it was 2009 to 2019, somewhere around in there, where we were running NSCA events, state, regional events. Vince spoke at quite a few of those. He would introduce speakers. He volunteered. He did all kinds of great work. A picture of him and his wife, I think, up in Apple Hill. And then we found some of these other photos off of Facebook that I wanted to show. He was really into kettlebells and loved his kettlebell certification and all the coursework and everything that he did. Just a fantastic human being. And man, we are going to miss him. 2023 has been a rough year. Vince makes the fourth person within a calendar year for me that we have lost 3 in 2023. So, man, tough pill to swallow here, but Vince, we love you, buddy. The world was definitely a better place with you in it, and we will miss you. Moving on to our content here. When we look at, I want to start with this because if you I put in gardening and lower back injuries. And these are all look at all the people that are devastated by their lower back. I'm trying to transition into something a little bit more light here, so excuse me if it's a little abrupt. But this guy right here cracks me up. Like, I mean, somebody just sniped him in the back. Look at this. He just punctured a kidney and pulled a hamstring all at the same time. But yeah, this is very, very common. One thing I want you to notice with a lot of these positions are the forward tilt. This lady all the way on the left, second row down all the way on the left, this is the most exposed, dangerous position for your lower back when gardening, but also in anything else that you're doing. As opposed to hinging, we round over like this lady in the center, very top, right? Rounding over in her spine rather than a good proper hinge. She was close, she was almost there, but then not so great. So we're gonna review some of these as the session goes on, or as our time goes on here together. I want to talk about these lower back injuries, why and how they are happening, what we can do in the weight room to prepare ourselves or our clients for these positions. And I know we're going into fall and we're not really, planting gardens or anything right now, but fall work, fall injuries occur kind of hand in hand. Raking, cutting wood, everything else that goes along, just as much as planting the garden. Now the seasons are kind of over for gardening, and now you've got to prep and kind of clean everything up. There's probably more hinging going on now than there will be, or should be hinging, but bendovers going on now than would be prior to everything kind of starting off. So when you think of this, and I look at some of these research articles, kind of keep in mind the specific nature of lower back pain and then lower back injuries, okay? Kind of two different areas of emphasis or two key components. there's a great deal of people out there, upwards of 80%, that are going to experience lower back pain. Now, those are rather acute, meaning it's 2 to 4 weeks, their back gets better, they move on with their life. Where you have chronic folks, we're looking at 40 to 60% of those are going to have chronic lower back pain, which means it's reoccurring or it's constant and they can't get rid of it, or it's really challenging to manage and to have a good quality of life because you're dealing with this constant lower back pain. Now, lower back pain means that you have muscular imbalances, maybe muscle spasms, aches and pains just because you're weak in these areas or imbalances. Different than lower back injuries, okay? Lower back injuries are going to affect anywhere between 20 and 40% of the population. And now we're talking about herniated discs, ruptured discs, cracked vertebra, nerve damage, all kinds of other things that kind of come into that. So keep that in mind as you're working your way through this content and what we're talking about. Now, this one in particular, Physical Activity and Lower Back Pain, a systematic review of recent literature. They took a 10-year block and just kind of went through all the articles and found this information to be pretty consistent, that the exposed lower back position, exposed meaning hinged and rounded over, basically a forward flexing or forward folding position, is pretty much the most damaging position to be in. You're at a higher risk if you're a sedentary person, lesser risk if you're more active. Either way, though, this is a exposed and dangerous position for us to be in if we're not in the proper positions, if we're not conditioned and strong enough to be able to maintain that, okay? Physical exposure during a patient transfer. So this is looking at EMS service, individuals, paramedics, fire, police, anybody that's going to be picking up and transferring a person and or a body because of the forward flexed and or rounded position, heavy loads, dead weight, not easy to manage or manipulate, lower back injuries, massive on the rise. Not just pain. Pain's very prevalent in this profession, but injuries, very much so on the rise, even to the point where the use of machines to be able to pick patients up and down is actually much preferred. One of my clients just went to, Kenton, where did you go, buddy? India, like somewhere, Europe, no, England. His sister's in England, that's it. So they're in England, and someone in the hospital, not his sister, I don't think, who was ill, someone else in the hospital fell down. And she was a bigger individual, and the nurses came over, and like none of them would try to help her up. He was telling me, like, I thought they were gonna, bring over a couple of orderlies and like pick them up from there. Nothing, okay? They just let her stay there. And then these guys came in with this big bag of deflated material. They stuffed it underneath her, like drug it all the way underneath, and then inflated it, and it was like a bed that like rose her up, and then they just slid her back onto the bed. So there are all kinds of different devices, from wenches and chairs that will loop a strap underneath them and elevate them up and put them into a chair, and then they can roll them, to a full wench that goes over the top of the bed and it cranes them up and swings them over, drops them back, just because the back injuries of being able to pick people up from that position. There's such heavy weight, there's such dead weight. In many cases, people can't keep their arms tight enough. I was reading an article and saw an Instagram video about it this morning of kids being able to, little kids, 6, 7, 8, 9-year-olds are able to engage their arms more muscularly than like the average 80-year-old. So if you go to pick them up, you can dislocate their arms, dislocate their elbows, right? The article was looking at dads or moms that spin their kids around and give them elbow and shoulder injuries, and they were testing how much tension they could hold. And then they looked at older pops and they're like, these kids are stronger than a lot of these 75, 80, 90-year-olds. So when you're like, well, I got to try to heave this person off the ground, it's not just they don't have the strength to pull up, they don't have the joint stability to be able to engage against you to allow you to pull them up. So you either injure their arms, or the person trying to pick them up, which dead weight folded in front of you, you're now rounding, and or even if you're in a good hinge, you're still having to heave against this 100, 200, 300 pound person, right? To try to get them up. But then what? Now I got to swing them into a chair or into a bed. It's just injury risk all the way around. Lower back is such an exposed position. We can't ignore it, right? So then we start going into, well, now medications are going to come. Now that leads into a whole nother review, a whole nother issue that comes about. Steroids and different injections that you can give to people. Is the lower back actually getting fixed, or the steroids just kind of like blocking out, reducing inflammation, etc., basically just covering up the damage done? making life better for the moment, but the steroids have shown to do more degenerative disc damage, joint damage, cartilage damage, bone damage, ligament damage, right? But they bring the swelling down. So if you're just like, I'm in immense miserable pain and I need this shot, you can get the shot, and then 50-50, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And then even in that case, if it does work, what did it actually do? It just bought you time. The way that I see those shots for any joint, any injury, if you're gonna get a steroid shot, that steroid shot should be given, again, this is my opinion, okay? Should be given knowing what the next step is to fix the problem. So it's a bridge, it's just something to get you there. I'm gonna have back surgery next July because I've got 8 months of stuff all planned out, right? Hypothetical. So if I know that, I'm gonna take 2 steroid shots to get me to next July. That's the idea. If you just keep taking shots, I'm afraid that they are probably not gonna work as efficiently as the more you take, and they're gonna accelerate the clock. Now, 3 months worth of regular damage could be more like 6 or 12, because in a lot of cases, like, you just don't feel the pain anymore. The pain was what was keeping you from rounding over your back, picking things up correctly, because you'd feel that and go, man, I gotta stop. Well, now you're not gonna feel it, right? So you're just like, cool, I'm good to go. I'll just keep working, and next thing you know, steroids start to wear off and your back injury is twice as bad as it once was. So that kind of leads in a whole other direction. Medications, pills, everything else can lead into addiction issues, all that. Everybody knows about opioid epidemic, all that kind of stuff. I won't go down that road necessarily today, but something to think about, okay, as we go. All right, this article, lower back problems, the pitfall of shoveling and gardening and raking. This shoveling and raking position is like, it's such an exposed, damaging position because of this ipsilateral setup. So let me show you. Most people, like if you're going to shake hands, okay, you're gonna go, oh, hey, nice to meet you. Left foot, right hand. That's a contralateral setup, okay? If I'm gonna row on something, I'm gonna put my left foot forward, I'm gonna pull with that right hand. Contralateral setup, okay? But when you go to rake or shovel, your feet are switched typically. Your right foot is forward and your right hand is leading the way. And so now this exposure, or when you're raking, right, as you're pulling, it's rare that we would do our left foot with our right hand in the front. You have to cross your body now to do the shovel or do the rake. So that's why we stand with this ipsilateral setup when we pull. How often do we train in that position? Very, very rarely. We should more, okay? So that's step one, is to do more ipsilateral setups. When you're doing single arm rows with your right arm, put your right foot forward. Get your body used to being same side engaged when you're pulling, pressing, overheading, anything, right, that you want to do. Try switching that position often on a regular basis because our bodies are built pretty well and pretty efficiently what we call cross-sectional strength, which means when my left foot's forward and my right hand is pulling, from my left hamstring all the way up the back side of my body, the front of the hip, over across my shoulder, down my right side, I have this cross-sectional activation basically from my right lower, my right glute, up across my back, down my left, down to my left foot. Like we have this cross-sectional activation that patterns not only when we walk, but when we pull or push or press or do any of those other lifts. So we get used to that, okay? Our bodies are strong in that cross-sectional activation. I don't know if I'm explaining this very well, okay? Let me stand back up to demo it. So when I do this, sorry for the butt shot. Left foot, I'm going up my left hamstring, across my glute, up through my QL here, my erectors in my spine, up across my back over to this side, the erectors on the right side, through my lats, my rhomboids, my delt, all the way down into my bicep. So I have a cross-sectional activation. If you can imagine my muscles glowing, I'm glowing up the backside, across over to this shoulder and down my arm, right? All those muscles are glowing because they're all the ones that are on. And then if I switch my setup, now it's this side all the way across over to here, now that. So there's X, 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 X. We're back and forth, we're back and forth. That's how the cross-sectional activation works typically. So now we get into a position to shovel or to rake, and it's not cross-sectional anymore. We're going from a contralateral setup to an ipsilateral setup. So now those musculatures that are used to crossing and engaging, right, this really well-developed muscle pattern, it's not there anymore. And it just leaves us for an exposure because we haven't trained there for a while and the muscles aren't trained in that pattern necessarily to do this movement over and over again. The shoveling, a push with a levered pull, the raking with millions of little tiny pulls back in towards the body. Lots and lots of reps and lots of damage can be done in an exposed or a non-traditionally trained position. So one of the best things we can do for our clients, especially if they garden or if they work in the yard at all, is when they're setting up to row or do a single arm chest press or anything like that, is to allow them to do a set contralaterally and then do 2 or 3 sets ipsilaterally and then another one contralaterally. Like work that in, manipulate that in there as often as you can. I would almost say like do it all the time because we've got so many years of contralateral dominance. And why is that? Because when we walk, we're contralaterally set up. Left foot goes forward with your right hand swinging forward and then vice versa. So we walk contralaterally, right? Or else that would look super funny. Like here's my regular walking. That's contralateral, okay? So everybody sees that, contralateral, opposite arm, right? But imagine if we were ipsilateral when we walked. We'd be like right and left. Like it would look just goofy as shit. That's not a natural, flowing, balanced position for us. So, hey, let's do 100 reps with weight at the furthest point away from our body, hooked to a stick, and let's make it really heavy and try to pull or rake it in, yank it in towards our bodies hundreds of times, and then expect not to get hurt. When that happens, I mean, it's a pretty easy way to look at it and go, yeah, people are gonna get damaged doing that, okay? So I liked this. I thought this was cool. 5 things you can do to prevent or reduce the risk of lower back injuries here. They've got some great ones, develop your core strength, improve flexibility around your hips, avoid repetitive bending, small bouts, etc. But the big one that I highlighted there is avoid sustained periods of one position, especially in the forward bend, which is probably where you're gonna be if you are gardening or working down on the ground. You're gonna be in that position a lot. So we're gonna talk about training in that position in a moment, and I'll give you a couple demos of a few lifts that I really like to do. And then ensure optimal shoveling technique. That's a tough one as well. Hips, everything else, bracing, abdominal work, all that. It's all good information, all good things to think about. Another article, 11 ways to keep your gardening with back pain. This one was a little bit more general, warming up. How many people actually go out and do a warm up before they start to garden? Not many. The whole idea is like to get your body loose so you don't just walk out and start shoveling gravel and next thing you know, your back goes out. Lift with support, of course, having the idea of like bracing the body and learning to use levers and different, even all the way down to like, using a dolly, right? When you're lifting some things heavy, there are straps you can get that you can hook around your torso and hook to the implement so it's more attached to you as you're lifting. Take frequent breaks, take more trips too with lighter loads if you can. Get support from kneeling chairs and or be in a seated chair. There's kneelers out there, pads that you can stack up, but there's also a variation of a chair where you're on like your shins, you're on your knees, and then your knees are at like an angled pad, and then there's a butt pad behind you. So it kind of looks like a Z, and you sit on this one side and it supports you underneath. I'll give you a reenactment here in a minute of that. Just simple cushions under your knees can definitely help too when you're working on the ground. And then, scooters to avoid twisting. It's basically like a cart or a roll, wheelbarrow, that kind of thing too. Garden while standing as best you can. Do as much while you're upright is good. Specialty tools. There's so many different tools out there that help get the job done. Make sure you're using and taking full advantage of that. Instead of having to just brute force everything with a single rake and a single shovel, get a hoe, get a leaf rake, get a pulling rake, get all, there's trenching shovels, there's flat shovels, there's spade shovels. You got all these different tools for all this stuff, all very important. Okay, as you go in there, and then bring the plants to you. I think that's a really good idea. Our garden beds are kind of half raised, so even if I'm kneeling, I'm still not having to tip forward to get over them. At kneeling, I'm kind of level, if not, similar in distance to where we're at. I think if you have any kind of major limitations with your back, elevating your beds to work on is an awesome idea, and a lot of times they do that in the cities. Okay. All right, so let's get into a couple of different lifts that we can do here. I want to showcase just a few of these for you. First of all, the kneeling position. Grab a knee pad here. These little Airex pads, these work great. They're 2 inches. They're very, very durable. I've had these for like 3 or 4 years. They're still in pretty good shape, and we use them every single hour. So we put a lot of reps on these, okay? Now, the first one that we do in here is just called a simple single arm row, but we call it a gardener row in this case, because you're gonna be in one point on the knee, another point on the foot, so that's a 2-point row, but we call it a 3-point gardener's row because of the forearm against your thigh. Basically, I would love to have something here that I could put my hand on, like a bucket or a bench or something like that, to give my third point of contact support, because as soon as I get that third point, my back that's now in this forward exposed position is no longer exposed, right? Not as much. If I have that third point of contact, I'm in a much safer, much stronger, much better position. Even for prolonged periods, that's a better position to be in. But if I don't have something like that that I can either move with me or manipulate with me, I can use my own thigh as a third point of contact. So forearm on the thigh. And then with your lower back, we want to make sure when people get into this position, they're not rounding into it, that they are hinging. You are displacing your hip, pushing your hip back, and then putting weight on your thigh. A lot of times too, folks will like set their arm here, but their back is still super taut, and you don't want it to be taut. You want to be engaged in trusting your weight onto your forearm. So brace and put all your weight on there, and then from a sandbell, dumbbell, kettlebell, whatever you want. I like these because they're higher, but I can perform a single arm row and then re-engage, unload it. So I'm practicing getting rid of the momentum every time. This is just a pure strength row every time I do it. Which, where if I have a dumbbell and I'm just pulling from here, basically I'm getting that dimmer on, off. It's harder, easier, harder, easier. But I don't get to like completely shut it off. It's like a deadlift, right? They call it a deadlift because you kill all the momentum. You get to deadlift it off the floor every single time. So it's a really good way to get very strong without any momentum. It's a single attempt every time basically. So let's do a deadlift, kill all the momentum for the single arm row. And the great way to do that is to simply set the weight down, loosen the grip, re-engage, pull it, loosen the grip, re-engage, pull it, loosen the grip. So every time I'm getting that good recruitment to this, okay? Now, what I would do is set an 8 or whatever you're doing, and then we switch to the other side, and you want to encourage both these positions to be trained pretty efficiently, pretty effectively. But notice I didn't stay there for 30 seconds or a minute. Like I'm going to be able to switch in positions here. Now I could be on a cable pulley doing single arm rows from here, again, contralateral setup, but then halfway through my set, I could switch my feet and do an ipsilateral side. So the simplicities of just switching what knee you're on, even though I'm rowing with the same arm, we're now going to train those exposed positions that when I'm raking, okay, ipsilateral, I'm now conditioned a little bit to be strong here. And that's where these longer, stronger rakes, where I can stay more upright, as opposed to a little rake where I have to sit down in this exposed position the whole time, continually going, okay, is my back in a good position? Well, it's only going to be able to hold this so long until eventually I start to fatigue, and I'm just like, my body just gets tired. And so now, one time I get out of position, and there goes my back. So now, back pain is pretty residual, which means it'll hurt, and the damage has been done, but you won't feel it immediately. You'll just kind of feel like, that's a little, and you see everybody doing that, oh man, that was different, and they're kind of moving, trying to loosen it up. You've already strained it, you've already aggravated it. Now it's like, how much can I tolerate, okay? And the more you continue to do, especially in the wrong positions, the worse it's gonna get. So typically you start to feel that ache and pain in your back, should call it for the day and just be like, I'm good, I'll resume this tomorrow. Let's go lay down for a little bit, try to get my back to relax. Any kind of medications or something that you are comfortable or capable of taking, that might be the time to do it. Okay, again, consult your doctor on all that kind of stuff. All right, the next row is instead of a kneeling 3-point, it's a standing 3-point. So I'm on both feet, I'm gonna hinge, and again, brace with my left arm against my thigh, and then I'm gonna grab my weight here, and I'm gonna row and unload, and row and unload. So what am I doing different this time? I'm going from a pronated grip to a neutral grip. So now I'm gonna add a little rotation in here, which is pretty common, right? When we're raking or we're pulling, we're gonna start to get some rotation. on our extremities as we go. So this is another good one. Do my 8, switch to my other side, and I'll do 8 over here. Again, every time I like to shut it off, take away that momentum, so I'm really getting strong. Now, my favorite version of this is called a progressive 3-point single arm row. And what progressive means is we are going to move in transition with this weight. So I'm going to start by putting the weight on my back foot, not literally, but on my instep, okay? I'm going to hinge, support with my left arm. I'm going to row, and when I set it down, I'm going to set it down on the instep of my left foot. I'm going to come back up, slide my foot up, hinge, row up, row it down, slide my foot up. Row it up, row it down, slide my foot up. So what are we practicing? I'm practicing a row. I'm practicing foot positions and transitions, especially if I have a short, small little gait. I'm practicing moving here with my feet wider. I get to reestablish my proper hinge, my single arm row every time I do this. How to get down, how to get up, and return. So I'm practicing a lot of these bouts, okay, that I want to do, these different things that I want to check off in my day, my proper up and down, my proper row, my proper hinge pattern, my proper foot positions and transitions. I'm working all kinds of different values here. But what I'm really getting out of this are single attempts at practicing this exposed lift over and over and over again as a single attempt, as opposed to, oh yeah, I do single arm rows all the time in the kneeling position, okay? In the half kneeling position, in a contralateral position, in a ipsilateral position. I do the entire thing. I hinge over, I brace, I row, I set the weight down, I stand back up. Now, I just did that to a bucket or a pot or whatever it is. Now I'm gonna do that again, right? At some point during the day, if I'm working outside for 2 hours, I'm gonna do 50 of those. So how do I condition myself to do that? You do what we just showed you right there. Every time, that whole thing, hinge, row up, row down, set it down, advance the feet, right? Hinge, row up, row down, advance the feet. You do that over and over again. That's a single bout of the entire movement over and over and over and over again. It's a really good way to practice this exposed position, this exposed technique of, injury, exposed lower back, this like primitive action of just getting stuff off the ground and pulling it towards you and then moving it to a new spot. Even though we do that all the time, we don't do it in as many reps in such a short period of focused time in one area, all down and in front of us. It's just our bodies aren't prepped for that. So when you know gardening season's coming, so February, because most of us plant in April, right? Give yourself a good 6 to 8 weeks to train for this and incorporate a lot of this stuff to help you get ready to plant your garden. Now, when we know the end of the season's coming, which is right around now, September to October, we're going to be harvesting our pumpkins and all that kind of stuff coming up in the next month and two. The gardens are going to be wrapped up. And so then you got to clean the whole thing up, gut everything out. You got to put in new soil, turn it, get everything ready for the next season. And, you're taking care of your what's the thing out there that we throw the eggshells and all that stuff in there? I always forget the name of that. Compost pile, right? The compost pile. You got to turn that whole thing, raking and pitchforking and all that. Again, exposed positions. It's just as much work wrapping up the garden as it is setting it up. And then maintenance throughout the summer if you're cutting wood, right? Very great exercise. I love it, by the way. Great exercise. Could not encourage people to do it more, but there's a right way to do it. And think of all the hinges versus bendovers, picking up the wood, putting it on there, split it. You got to pick up the 3-4 pieces. I mean, you're doing 5 to 6, 7 hinges per piece of wood, right? And you've got 30 rounds that you got to go through with each of that. That could be 150 hinges in the day. If you're doing them wrong and you do them all in an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours, how do you think your back's going to feel? That's what we're talking about, is training for these activities. Thinking of them as this is an outcome I've got to train and prep my body to be able to do. What should I do in the weight room? What should I do with my clients to help prep them for that so they survive it, do it really, really well, but don't pay for it in the aftermath? Because a lot of times these lower backs, that residual pain, it's not bad in the moment, but 3, 4, 5 hours later, everything's tightened up, they've relaxed, and here we go. quality of life starts to suffer. We know that between 40 and 80% of the people out there are going to experience some type of really bad lower back pain and or major injury. I'm lumping all those numbers together now, right? Let's do our best to prep people to be ready for this and armed for this and to be in the best potential position they can. All right, that's enough from me. I hope you all enjoyed this. Comments, questions, hit me up down below. If not, please subscribe, please ring the bell. Make sure you don't miss any of the other information we have coming out. By the way, November 4th, we are doing a live event in Folsom, California, TOA Folsom, Workforce Fitness. Check out our website, trainingtheolderadult.com. Workforce Fitness, John Thomas, our TOA affiliate there, is hosting us. We're gonna have 30 people in-house. We can get as many people online as well to join us. We will be recording, so you can always come back and revisit the information, or if you can't join us live, you can watch it anytime. CEU approval is pending. We got our information out there, waiting to hear back. But we've got very good content. We're fairly certain we will get that, so we're excited for that. We'll announce it again as we get closer. But check that. If you want to come, hop on there, get our early bird pricing. You get a pair of Angle 90 handles, a t-shirt, lunch, all kinds of great stuff. We're going to have so much fun because it's our first event live back in person since March 2020. So we're excited to see you all there. We would love to have you. Questions on that, hit me up down below too. I got you. Or check out the website, trainingtheolderadult.com. All right, everybody. Continue to fight your good fight against sarcopenia. I love you. We'll talk to you later. Peace.